In my Victory Kraken review, I mentioned that I ran 2 amps in a wet-dry setup. This is an in-depth look into how I run my rig to get some huge 80s style rock tones. Wet-dry rigs came out in the early 80s to try and emulate the studio tones players were getting in a live situation. There's a great video by Vertex which explains the history of wet-dry rigs in a lot more detail, but those style of rigs went out of fashion in the late 90s. Wet-dry and wet-dry-wet rigs, say that 10 times fast, have made a bit of a resurgence in the last couple of years, and I'd attribute a lot of that to that pedal show. They've been talking about these style of rigs for years, but it never really clicked with me that I could use it for heavy tones. Until 2018, my band got to support Chris Holmes on some of his Irish tour. Chris was the guitar player in Wasp, and when I heard him sound check, I knew he was doing something different. It was the thickest guitar sound I'd ever heard live. This was the rig he was using, and he explained wet-dry to me. He had 2 amps, one was dry, just distortion, the other was using a very short modulated delay. That's what the Lexicon unit is doing. Today, I'll show you how I'm replicating that, but in my own way. The guitars that I'm using for this video are the Ormsby SX GTR and the Parts Caster from the Strat to Super Strat video. Going into the front of both amps are the Boss TU2 and the Strymon Sunset for a little bit of added drive. Then the signal is split and sent to both amps using the radial ABY. It's important that this isn't just a standard ABY, as the radial allows you to isolate one output and reverse the polarity. This helps tackle any hum or phasing issues you might have when running 2 amps. Then for the wet amp I have a Boss DD500 going into the effects loop. It's very accurate and allows me to change the delay time by the millisecond, which is very important. I'll be using 2 sounds today. A very short 43 millisecond modulated analog delay, and a long dual digital delay set at 769 milliseconds. Technically, a wet-dry rig is 2 cabs, one 100% wet and one 100% dry. Using this setup, I have the ability to have one cabinet, in this case the Zilla, 100% dry, while having the Marshall cab either 100% wet, meaning there's no dry signal, just delay repeats, which is a true wet-dry system, or I can have the Zilla 100% dry and the Marshall wet with dry signal too. More of a dry wet dry rig. You'll be able to hear the differences between these settings. Now this is real wet-dry, 100% wet in one cab, 100% dry in the other. 100% wet, 100% dry. It seems that with the long delay repeats, the true wet-dry sounds a lot cleaner. Let's hear how the two different systems sound on rhythm alone. Dry, wet, dry. True, wet, dry. One place this type of rig sounds great for is a clean tone. Check out this comparison. Just wet. Together. I personally prefer the true wet-dry for cleans and long delays. But for heavy rhythms, I really like the dry cab coupled with the dry wet cab. So that's the setup. It's not always practical, and you absolutely can sound great without it, but you feel a huge difference when you hit a chord. It just makes it all worth it. This is of course dependent on if you have a good sound engineer too. But that's all from me. Let me know which setup you prefer. Oh, and for those of you that like my other style of content,
don't worry, the big one is coming.